How are you?
Professor Abramsky, the perfect day to have you on.
Well, I'm delighted to be on. How are you? How is your new year going?
It's going smashingly well, according to the polling in Georgia. Let's just get to it. First of all, what does it mean that Raphael Warnock has won in Georgia? And hopefully, I'm hanging by a thread watching the breaking news that Jon Ossoff will also be winning there.
Yeah, I've just been looking at the latest numbers coming in, and all of the numbers indicate that Ossoff is going to win that race. This is this is fantastic. If you had said 2 months ago, after Biden's presidential victory, if you had said, all right, the Democrats are going to thread a path to victory through winning in Georgia, and they're going to win in Georgia through a combination of things. The first is just tremendous on-the-ground organizing, especially in the African-American community. And the second thing is that Donald Trump would tell his own supporters the elections were so corrupt that they shouldn't vote. The Schadenfreude here is just absolutely fantastic.
It is fabulous, and it's fantastic to celebrate. Now, we're going to get wet before it rains here because Jon Ossoff looks like, as you said, he will win. We are speaking with Sasha Abramsky, freelance journalist, professor of journalism at UC Davis, and also the author of the Signal Noise column twice weekly for The Nation magazine. Here's the question. Now, we're going to have the House and the Senate, hopefully, and the presidency. How terrified should corporations be that the progressive wing, that we're actually going to have to enact some progressive legislation in order to save the Democratic Party's reputation?
I think that there is an opportunity here. And the opportunity is not that Biden is instinctually radical. He's not. He's a decent politician. His instincts are in the right place. But he's instinctually an institutionalist and a centrist. The opportunity is the Republicans have so overplayed their hand, not just through the radicalization of their politics, but through the actions of the last few weeks, where they've essentially facilitated Trump's language of a coup d'etat. So Trump has been trying to lead an insurrection from within against the institutions of the American government. And a huge percentage of the Republican Party is along for the ride with him. Now, the reason that's important is they're not going to win. I mean, there could well be street protests, maybe even violence in D.C. today. Trump's clearly ginning up trouble on the streets. But at the end of the day, Biden's going to be the president. And the Democrats who have said, well, we need to heal and we need to unite, now they have an opportunity to actually tell the American people, well, we need to heal and we need to unite, but we need to do so on our terms because the Republican Party has forfeit its democratic legitimacy. The Republican Party has become a party that defends a sort of fascist politics of coup d'etat or putsch if you don't get your way. Mm-hmm. Now, what that means is there is an opportunity for a new political language to emerge. Trump's been discredited. Trumpism is being discredited on the ground in Georgia right now. McConnell's strategy of tolerating any and every outrage in order to get tax cuts and deregulation and judges, that's been discredited, which means there's an opening. Doesn't mean the Democrats will get everything they want or everything progressives want, but there is an opening for a new day in American politics. And this is exciting stuff. I mean, if you're a political journalist, this is a really remarkable change that we're seeing. And last night in Georgia, I don't think you can overstate how important that vote was.
I don't think we can overstate it either. And we do want to thank the African-American community. I found there was a bit of poetic justice that in a state that was built and founded off the backs of, black slaves, that it is people of color who have returned the Union from, going down the forces of fascism. And I appreciate that so much.
I think it's amazing. And, I was just watching last night and thinking the pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta is now going to be a U.S. senator. The Old South, the heart of the Old South, has just elected the heir to Martin Luther King's position in Atlanta as its senator. It's a truly extraordinary moment.
Well, I had a picture of him and now I can't find it, but we're running through some nice photos here of all the important players. Your thoughts about the future for Stacey Abrams, who is obviously instrumental in laying the groundwork. I mean, Even what you said about Ebenezer Church, you're like, wow, that's blowing the mind. But Stacey Abrams has been working on the ground for this victory for at least a decade, I would imagine. The fact that it didn't culminate in her own victory is quite good, I have to say, for democracy, because she was able to continue her work, to push the fact that now we have the Senate. Democrats have the Senate.
I think when the history books of this era are written, Stacey Abrams is going to be one of the most important figures in American political life at this moment, because she played this long game. People in the Democratic Party said to her, you're off on a wild goose chase. There's no way you can turn Georgia blue. And she said, I can. And her strategy basically was, there are vast numbers of people who have felt so disempowered over the years that they haven't bothered to vote. If we can bring them into the political process with a message of progressive political change, and if they come out and vote reliably, you can change the contours of Georgia politics. And she almost did it against Brian Kemp a couple of years back when she was running for governor. And after she, I don't know if you want to use the word, was cheated out of the governorship, but she didn't win, at least in part because of voter suppression. And she made it a mission to just do everything she could to get people registered to vote. And so when you look at the numbers, we're not talking about a few tens of thousands. We're talking about 1 million new voters between 2018 and 2020 in Georgia. I mean, this is just an extraordinary increase in the franchise. It ranks up there with the Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964. It is just a massive, massive rejection of the politics of voter suppression. And Stacey Abrams worked out a strategy that ended up delivering Biden the presidency in Georgia, ended up delivering the Democrats the Senate in Georgia, and could very easily end up with a Democratic governor in Georgia 2 years from now. And you asked what her future is. I imagine, and I have no inside knowledge, but I imagine that Joe Biden is very, very keen to have her in his inner circle in some capacity, because she clearly is one of the most important figures in progressive politics, and probably by a landslide, the most important figure in terms of mobilizing people to vote.
What do you think the Biden administration should prioritize now that he has the power to enact legislation? Well, are we going to see a rapid fire? I just don't want him to do the same thing they did under Obama, where they're like, let's hold hands, everybody's got to get along, et cetera, and squander the next 2 years. Americans need to see in the next 2 years that Democrats are better for them than Republicans.
I think there are a few things they can and should do. Number one, you can roll back the Trump era tax cuts with a simple 50-vote majority. You don't need 60 votes to roll back the tax cuts. And that would liberate a huge amount of money, which could then be used to invest in opening public school safety and getting vaccination programs rolled out, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be very high up my priority list. It gives them room to conduct some version of immigration reform. It gives them room to push a more aggressive climate agenda. And perhaps the most important thing, because we've seen what Trump did with this power, it gives them room to get their court nominees approved. If you look at the damage Trump has done through imposing these ultra-conservative judicial nominees up and down the system, well, Biden now has an opportunity. For example, if there's a Supreme Court opening, he can get a Supreme Court justice confirmed. He can get federal court judges appointed. He can do stuff that McConnell would have blocked him from doing. The other thing is they now control committees. Now, I've been arguing in my column for the last couple of months now, there has to be a legal day of reckoning for what Trump is doing. Not just what he did in the past, but for the fact that he is actively encouraging sedition and voter suppression and illegal vote manipulation in public comments, in telephone calls, in rally speeches. Trump is basically doing one illegal action after another, after another, after another. New York Times today said even though he's got 2 weeks left in his presidency, he still should be impeached and convicted and prevented from ever running for office again. And I really believe this. This isn't political vengeance. This is a matter of upholding the democratic system and the constitutional system of government. Republicans have shown they're basically a party that no longer has confidence or faith in democracy. If we want to reinstall the workings of democracy, we have to make sure the legal system works, which means that, it's going to be important to have committee hearings on what Trump has been doing and what Republican leaders have facilitated with the challenges to the Electoral College and, the sheer seditionist nature of the last few weeks of politics on the Trumpian right of the Republican Party, there has to be a legal day of reckoning. And instead of having Lindsey Graham in charge of the Judiciary Committee, you're now going to have a Democrat, a progressive Democrat in charge. I can't remember who it's going to be, but it completely alters the contours of what can be done and what can be investigated and what regulations can be changed and what laws can be changed. It's a really big moment.
But are they going to do it?
I guess the proof's in the pudding. We'll have to see in the next few weeks.
I know. I was thinking today that centrist Dems and corporate Dems and shy Dems and Dems from sort of purpley districts are still going to throw us under the bus. I don't think everyone's going to be like, AOC, what do you think we should do? And then, get to it.
But let me push back a bit on this one. I don't think it's a matter of throwing under the bus. I think you're absolutely right. The progressives aren't going to get everything they want in the Biden administration, but I do think they're going to get quite a lot. And that's the nature of, building the coalition that's sustainable over 2, 4, 6, 8 years. The way I'd measure it is there are certain things that Biden absolutely has to, his feet have to be held to the fire on. Absolutely, he has to make a pretty aggressive effort to roll back these egregious immigration law changes that Trump implemented. Absolutely, he has to find a way to re-empower the Environmental Protection Agency and also the Labor Department so that it works for labor instead of for employers. Those are baseline issues. But is he going to do absolutely everything? Well, no, there isn't going to be an AOC-styled Green New Deal immediately. The votes aren't there. It doesn't matter if there's a Democratic majority or a Republican. The votes just aren't there for the kind of Green New Deal AOC is pushing. But if that's the starting point for a negotiation, you're going to end up with a series of environmental policies that make sense, that they may not be as radical as you'd like or I'd like, but they're going to put America on a path towards a more sustainable economy. And you contrast that with Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, green lighting pretty much any and every polluting industry, lowering environmental standards. It's going to be night and day. And, the same on immigration. The progressives aren't going to get everything they want on immigration, and the hundreds of miles of wall that have been built at tens of billions of dollars a cost, they're not going to be dismantled overnight. But we're going to get a more humane asylum policy. We're going to start admitting a decent number of refugees again. We're going to probably build into law more durable protections for DACA recipients. I mean, these are huge changes, and that alone would make the presidency worthwhile. So I don't think we should look at it as an all or nothing thing. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some as progressives. We're going to win a whole lot more in the next 4 years than we would have if Georgia hadn't voted the way it did yesterday.
Do you think that progressives who have been watching MSNBC, liberals, progressive Democrats, whatever you want to call, who've been terrified by the fear mongering of MSNBC are going to be ready to let go of that terror? I'm almost talking psychologically now in psychological terms, to be in a space of encouragement and pushing forward for as best a platform as we can manage. It's quite a shift to go from just constantly terrorized by the media to, hey, there's a chance, here. That's a whole new space.
That's a really interesting point. And I think that goes not just for the viewers, but it goes for the actual journalists. I've been writing the Signal Noise column for 2 years at this point, and I've been writing on Trump and the sort of existential horror he represents since he was a candidate 5 years ago. And as of January 20th, assuming that Trump is out of office, which he will be, I'm going to pivot. I'm not going to be doing a twice a week Signal Noise column on Donald Trump. I'm going to be doing a different column on different issues. Now, I'm not saying that to sort of highlight my experience per se, but I think it's going to be a universal, that the country as a whole is going to have to go through a sort of cultural detox, because Trumpism has been so toxic and it's been so all encompassing.
I just want to say that I was right. I'm sorry to
what if you
off to toot my own horn, but you know how much bullshit that ACT.tv and myself included have had to sit through by keeping the focus on activism, on pushing forward, on the victories that we are having in the face of all of this horror, and just kind of trying. Oh, the comments, Sasha, people are like, you're a moron. They're like, oh, how could you possibly be? Okay, it is slightly radical to keep hope in a very dark time, but I don't know. I'm celebrating what we did. From, we maintained the road, and now everyone is going to stampede down it.
I think that's true. I think Trumpism has been so culturally and psychologically dominating as a force because of its irrationality. You throw every irrational thing out there, and every crazy conspiracy theory, and you basically toxify the culture. So everyone's angry, everyone's saying you moron, you this, you that, you get death threats if you write something, all this stuff that is so antithetical to democracy. And now we get a chance to take a deep breath. And we're seeing the last spasms of Trumpism. We're seeing the crazy street fighting fascists coming out, and sort of Trump basically throwing in his lot with America's version of the stormtroopers. America doesn't want to be governed by the Proud Boys. I mean, there aren't hundreds of millions of people chomping at the bit to be governed by, neo-Nazis and white nationalists. And Trump is throwing in his lot with these extremists. And it basically shows exactly what the Trumpist project is all along. And you and I knew that. And, anyone paying attention knew what the Trumpist project was like. But now it's impossible to ignore. Mainstream Republicans can't ignore the fact that Trump's calling for a coup d'etat. Mainstream Republicans can't ignore the fact that QAnon is now sort of the governing philosophy of Trumpism. And I think over time, the sheer madness of that is going to make it less and less and less appealing. There'll be a hardcore that stays with him. There'll be, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 25% of the electorate that sort of defines itself as Trumpist. But as a governing ideology, this thing is in its death throes at the moment. And that's healthy. It shouldn't be, something like this should have no place in the high places and positions of power. It's crazy politics. And as you detox from that crazy politics, it gives you room for a more sensible debate. It doesn't mean everyone's going to agree with Joe Biden or with all his policies, but it does mean we're going to have a series of policies that are based on rationalism rather than gut instinct and id and everything else. And that's good for democracy. It's good for democracy to tone everything down a bit. It's good for democracy if Biden is a bit boring and a bit normal. That's good. That's a good thing. We can just take a deep breath and we can work out where as a political culture we want to go from here.
This has been great. It's been a great day. I'm so glad that you were the guest today to celebrate and not to mourn or not to parse. We got to celebrate. I'm looking forward, to the actual number and the actual concession speeches. And I wonder if they'll have to go to jail in Georgia, those other two jerks, the Perdue and the this one here, whatever her name is. I'm forgetting her name already.
You'll certainly have Donald Trump out there sort of calling for vengeance against them for being losers. I mean,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oy, oy, oy.
Oy, oy, oy.
Well, thank you so much. Sasha Abramsky, are you really going to not write the signal noise column anymore? How am I supposed to refer to you now?
You're going to refer to me as Sasha Abramsky, author of whatever the title of the next column is that I'll be doing.
All right. Well, we look forward to it.
Always a creature of the Trump era. That was how it was imagined. So Trump era coming to a blessed close. I move on to bigger and better things.
Abramsky, Sasha, that's where you find Sasha on Twitter. And also you'll find him on the show regularly as a appreciated and just a highly prized addition to what we're doing here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. You're watching Act TV. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, which is what I say all the time. Have you forgotten? Don't forget. I'm Julianna Forlano. Find me on Twitter. If you're watching us on Facebook, I have some news. We are going straight to YouTube starting next week. So this program will not be on Facebook. All of the interviews are going to be on YouTube. So you can watch them anytime you want, along with the rest of the shows we have there. We have the Black Power Magic Hour. We have, I don't know, does James's segment have a name? It's definitely James, James from the internet, who has a segment, and it's fantastic. He will be on there. I'll continue to do my interviews from there, and I will also continue to do my own commentary and the progressive news. So thanks for watching. It's been a joy to be on Facebook, kind of, until you can look at my Twitter feed if you want to see how I feel about how Facebook deals with progressive media. But anyway, have a great one. It's been a great joy, and this is an excellent day. I feel like job well done. We did our job here, and we will continue pushing. The fight is certainly not over. Have a great day.